IQ. We want to say a special thanks and a happy pride to everybody out there. I've got great guests, my brothers, obviously. Dr. Craig, I say to doctor, but he clearly is insightful, and we just want to make sure that everybody knows that this is all about loving our community, increasing our IQ. But I've got Antonio Craigwell. And I also have my dearest friend, it's Antoine actually, but my dearest friend, of course, Larry Scott, my dear brother, and of course, Dr. Nikolai from APR. How are you gentlemen doing?
Good, thank you.
I'm good.
You know, for the culture, it's all about the culture these days. And I just want to say, what are we doing for the whole pride culture right now? How is that a movement?
I think, if I may go first, we're doing a lot to advance the pride culture. You know, I see a lot coming out of the Black queer community, Black same gender loving communities, a lot of art, a lot of academic work, a lot of research surrounding HIV/AIDS, even COVID-19 research. So there's a lot happening within the culture, the Black queer culture right now. It's a cool movement. Also, there's a lot of Black queer leadership within the Black Lives Matter movement right now. Black Pride started as a riot, started by Black and Latino trans people, fighting back against oppression. So it's kind of timely that in the 51st year after the first Pride, after the Stonewall riots, that there's another movement happening right now that includes Black people, Black queer people.
Brother Craigwell?
I think that Pride, the concept of pride is a very white-centered or oriented construct that has, in many instances, utilized and capitalized on Black issues, on Black culture, and absorbed them, and don't often include the Black community. And so and I like what Larry was talking about just now, where he said that, yes, indeed, there are increasing numbers of Black, gay and lesbian, same gender loving and queer members of all parts of the communities who are stepping in, who are stepping up, who are taking responsibility. And very often what they're doing is that they are carving a space out for themselves that is uniquely Black, that is representative of what it means to be Black. And of course, that comes with challenges such as access to funding and resources, which is what the white community has, but Black community don't often have. And the other aspect of that is support from among their own kind. But that is beginning to grow. That is beginning to develop. So like at the beginning of August in New York City, where I am, you've got Black Pride. And Black Pride is a huge event. Okay? Now, how it's going to be scaled down and done this year with COVID, everything is now going virtual. So, but it's a huge event that allow Black, LGBTQ, queer, everybody to understand that you have a place in the community. You are not alienated. You're not outside of the community. You have a place, you have a function.
Thank you. Same question, Dr.
Yes. Nicordelai Corte.
No, I got you. You're the only doctor here.
It is. No, it's great to be here, and it's great to be celebrating Pride Month. But I suspect we celebrate our Pride 365 days a year, and I think in the era of COVID-19 and with the social unrest that's afoot across the country, this is a very different Pride Month. I have been, sharing with people that now is a tremendous opportunity. It presents a tremendous opportunity, for us to make Black lives matter, and that's not just hyperbole. That's not, just, rhetoric, but I think that's an extension of the work that all of us get a chance to lead and be a part of every single day. We get to make Black Lives Matter, and we get to draw on our experience as Black LGBTQ people in doing that. And a big part of how we do that, that is true to who we are as Black people around the world, is very communal. Building a longer table of partners, a longer table of folks, to organize and mobilize and begin to build a better world. And just last week, I had an opportunity to participate in a panel conversation with a number of leaders from that are affiliates of the Center for Black Equity. Folks that lead Black prides across the country in places like Memphis and places like Selma and Montgomery, places like Harlem and so many other places across the country. And so it's important that while we're celebrating Pride, we recognize that there are folks that are doing this heavy lifting every day out of the year, right? And in very challenging circumstances, often under-resourced, often under the radar. And so I think Pride Month, from my view, provides an opportunity for us to shine a light and lift up our peers and our family members, our colleagues that are doing some extraordinary work in hopes that other folks will lock arms with them and help to build a better world.
Better world. We want to thank Aarp for creating and sponsoring Health IQ for sure. But for the culture, I think that even having a moment for people to hear words like loving, which is being used, I think it's really important that we think about our community in a loving way. When we think about that, we also have Black Lives Matter. Dr. Nikolai, how has Aarp really been involved in this Black Lives Matter movement?
Can you share? I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? The signal was.
How has Aarp really participated in the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good question, and the Black Lives Matter movement predates recent events. I think that's important to share. And as I was sharing earlier, I think there's so much that we all have an opportunity to do and have done to make Black Lives Matter. I can tell you that from an LGBTQ perspective, we were very conscious in building an approach that wasn't just about showing up at Pride celebrations in June, and then you go the rest of the year. It's about supporting the gala dinners, doing a nice little hand wave, and then, you don't see us the rest of the year. But we have really invested in partners that have local chapters and affiliates across the country. And so the Center for Black Equity, from an African-American perspective, has been central to our work, and facilitating collaboration between the Center for Black Equity affiliates and some of our state offices across the country has been a demonstration of what we have been doing to make Black Lives Matter. And that's just from an LGBTQ SGL perspective. From a larger Black perspective, the Urban League and NAACP and Essence and the list goes on and on. We have been supporting and working shoulder to shoulder and investing in Black organizations and Black people for a very long time. And we're really proud of that work. We know that this moment in our country means that we may have to invest more, and we have to take a step back and learn more. At Aarp, we don't pretend to have a monopoly on good ideas, but we do work really hard to glean insights. insights that help to center LGBTQ older adults and older adults more broadly in the work ahead. And so, we're really proud of that. The last thing I'll add, in addition to working with our partners, research is really important, and if you all will indulge me for a moment, and let me sort of geek out a bit.
You're at home, so we want you to know we're proud of our geeks too. We need more Black geeks for sure.
Yeah, yes, proudly. Research matters, data collection matters, and if we can't see ourselves in the data, I often say no data, no justice. No data, no justice. And so the research that I've been a part of, the research that my team has been a part of, we've done our best and will continue to do more to make sure that the lived experiences of Black folks, Black older adults, Black LGBTQ older adults, is not on the periphery, but how do we bring that to the center of our decision-making, of our partnerships, of our investments, and of all the ways in which we support, the 50 plus population across the country. So partnerships and research are two ways in which AARP is making Black lives matter.
Yeah, that data cannot be spoken about as much as these disparities in the data. I think things that are going to come out of this are going to be crazy for us to really begin to glean. The challenges facing gay men during this season of COVID, Mr. Craigwell, what do you think those challenges, at least the top three, are?
As people, especially for Black and people of color, LGBTQ, SGL, who have traditionally or often struggled with a sense of community and identity and being an acceptance, who were beginning to forge networks and bonds, to suddenly, because of the pandemic, be thrown on their own devices, as it were, confined to their apartments or their households and having to face isolation. For many, from what I've been hearing and talking with others, is loneliness, feelings of isolation, but also increased degrees of stress and anxiety, particularly anxiety. And the anxiety for many who are LGBT people of color comes from two sources. One is that they have been accustomed previously to being on the go all the time, going like the Energizer Bunny. But now, because of COVID, they've had to pull a screeching halt and stop. And so their thoughts are beginning to catch up with them. Things that they may not have been thinking about, may not have been addressing, may not have wanted to talk about, look at, now are suddenly surfacing. Second, anxiety for those LGBT people of color who, to themselves, they may have accepted themselves for who they are, but they may still be in environments among family, either direct or indirect, or in roommate situations where they are not known to be LGBT. And so they've now got to a point, it's the equivalent of somebody who is HIV positive and your family don't know that you're HIV positive, so you've got to sneak around to take your medication. And so for many people who are now forced to be at home with people who they would rather not be among, because those people disaffirm their identity, but now they're confined there. But a couple of things that have become offshoots of that, one of which I found extraordinarily problematic here in New York State, is that when the governor of New York State did the lockdown, he decreed that one essential service would mean that liquor stores could remain open. And for many people of color who are struggling, alcohol and substance use were already on the rise. And now to be isolated, now to be shut down, that the only thing you may have is to be able to run to the liquor store and get a quarter or a pint. Okay? As we say in Guyana, a flatty. Okay? One of the things that we began to see was an increase in the number and the fear in the increase in the number of substance use. Okay? And the increase in the number of people who are using alcohol. Now, I'm not saying that there should have been banned or, there should have been a restriction on that too, but it should have been managed a little more carefully, because now you said it was open. Everybody, you can just go get alcohol as an essential service. But one of the things that is going to come out of COVID, because we are still not out of COVID, we're still in the first wave or the first phase of COVID. COVID has not subsided, and it has not, we have not stabilized. We don't know what our society, what our economy, what our relationships are going to look like when we have reached some point of stability. But one of the things that we have to look at and start talking about significantly in Black and people of color communities, and by extension, LGBT people of color communities, is our mental health. There is going to be a significant explosion on mental health needs and mental health resources and mental health demands. Because on one side, we've got the trauma that comes from losing family members and people from COVID-19 who were suddenly taken from us. And then on the flip side, you've got all the accumulated trauma that people have been dealing with as Black and people of color. And then the COVID-19 has come along. And then you've got your sexual orientation and gender identity. And then you've got your race. All of that continues to build. People are going to need mental health care even more now than they did before.
Right. Larry Scott Walker, same question, challenges, and we really want some insight.
Similar to Antoine, we've definitely at Thrive, we have the largest network of Black gay men living with HIV in the country. Isolation and depression are big, huge issues that Black gay men living with HIV face. So at Thrive, the reason we created the support networks is to combat that. So Antoine, I would invite you to have your members reach out to us if they're feeling isolated. They want to be connected to other Black gay men so that they're not feeling those increased feelings of depression and things like that. The structural barriers are what I'm seeing most of here in Atlanta. Atlanta already had a housing crisis for Black poor people who couldn't afford, people who not afford to, $1,700 of rent. But those most marginalized are, Black trans people, Black queer people, Black people living with HIV. They're said to be some 400 youth that sleep on the street every night. People, highly marginalized people are rarely able to physically distance, to quarantine and shelter in place and things like that. So I'm seeing an increased number of people looking for housing and things like that. And in a situation where the housing market in Atlanta is already highly saturated. In addition to that, people being furloughed from their jobs, not having, being either furloughed or let go from their jobs, there being a lack of quality jobs and employment for people. I'm seeing a lot of that. And in addition to the abundance of anti-Blackness that's happening right now in and around the Black community, people are being attacked, by the police for not wearing masks, for having on the wrong masks, and all of this stuff. Like, as a Black person, we don't just get to go through like a singular issue. Like, I don't get to just be like a Black man going through a pandemic. I have to be like, all of the things at once. I have to be, a sexual minority. I have to be, I have to combat anti-Blackness in every space that I'm in, even at the doctor's office. People are going in and, having to deal with implicit bias that they should never have to face. So a lot of the issues that we see right now are unfortunately issues that we saw pre-COVID. They're just compounded because of the COVID situation, because of the pandemics, and not just the pandemic of COVID-19, but the pandemic of anti-Blackness as well. But then again, anybody that's looking at this, especially people living with HIV, if you are feeling increased, loneliness, especially if you're a person who is aging with HIV, we have a network called the Silver Lining Project. We can connect you to other brothers aging with HIV. We can connect you to people of trans experience living with HIV, or just people not living with HIV. This is not the time for any of us to feel alone, especially if you're a person living with HIV or any other comorbidity that puts you at high risk for becoming ill or even dying from COVID.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. McCordalai, we have the same question for you, the challenges facing gay men during this season of COVID-19.
Yeah. I just want to riff off of what Brother Larry just shared in terms of the challenges really existing pre-COVID. COVID has exacerbated some of the pre-existing conditions, shall we say, some of the pre-existing disparities that have existed in our community, and need to be dealt with a fierce urgency. AARP commissioned a landmark research study called the Maintaining Dignity Study. And if you go to aarp.org/pride, you can download the study in full. And there were a number of really compelling insights that stem from that study. And just hearing the conversation here, I'm thinking, housing, for example. We found that 34% of the folks that we surveyed felt the need to hide their identity in order to obtain suitable housing. These are LGBTQ older adults, 45 plus, right? In terms of social isolation, I've heard that mentioned in this conversation. 76% of the folks that we surveyed felt that they had inadequate social support networks to rely on as they age. In terms of long-term care, about 2/3 of the folks that we surveyed feared neglect, physical and verbal harassment in a long-term care setting. We know that, since COVID hit, there has been an explosion in the number of older adults that have died of COVID in nursing homes, and even more cases of COVID in nursing homes. And so to Brother Larry's point, in addition to the anxiety of just being in a long-term care facility or an assisted living facility during COVID, if you are, Black and gay, there is reason to have a heightened anxiety. And then last but not least, just navigating the healthcare system. 42% of the Black folks that we surveyed, particularly Black gay men, believe that they were at a double advantage based upon their sexual orientation and their race in terms of navigating the healthcare system and being treated well, being treated fairly by healthcare workers. And so we have our work cut out for us. It's important to note that we can't do it alone, and I appreciate the resources that have been mentioned by Brother Antoine and Brother Larry here today. AARP has a resource called AARP Community Connections. And if you go to aarpcommunityconnections.org, you can join a mutual aid group in your community. And if there is not a mutual aid group that exists, you can start a mutual aid group. These are just neighbors helping neighbors, folks supporting each other. And, if you want to make it sort of a mutual aid group for Black gay men, by all means. We also have a feature on that site that's called AARP Friendly Voice, where you can volunteer to do something as simple as make a phone call. Make a phone call to an older adult, an elder that may be feeling isolated and just wants to hear a friendly voice. This is where we're at in this COVID era in 2020. And I think it's not one of these things, but I think it's all of the tips, tools, and resources that have been shared thus far and will be shared during the course of this call that are going to meet our community where they're at and help folks to get to the other side of this terrible pandemic.
Sounds like more data and more resources, which we want to come out of Health IQ here and rolling out. I think it's really key for us to find resources because many people aren't able to leave their home. So thanks so much for that. We want our community to know where help is available and encourage them. I think at this moment, there are a lot of members of our community that need encouragement on being able to know what else they can do. So Make a Call is an example of how you can get involved.
Absolutely.
Some people right now are trying to figure out how to get involved, still be in the house, how to get involved and learn a little bit more about my community. So all the resources that we can provide are really key right now. And those are free. So I think that's another benefit. If you don't know and you're missing it and it's free, it's a long time. Health disparities and Black gay men in the community. It seems like we have had, as a Black community, exacerbated, but how is it affecting our community, the Black gay community, LGBT community? I'll start with you this time, Larry.
Health disparities in the Black community, I feel like to talk about the Black experience in general, you just have to start with Blackness. Unfortunately, there are a lot of health disparities in the Black community because of the anti-Blackness and racism, the structural violence that we face. When you add being a sexual minority to that, you add an additional layer of oppression, unfortunately. So often we hear our members saying, they felt like because they were gay at the clinic that the person treated them a certain way or treated them with a diminished amount of respect. But also the systems, the system, the way that our systems are set up in America, and unfortunately the healthcare system as well. There's a lot of bias and prejudice there. Certain people have access to things that other people don't have access to. Right now, we're in a space of telemedicine. Everything is telemedicine, and it's almost like it's a new concept. But certain demographics of people have always had access to telemedicine. Always could call their doctor and say, "Hey, I'm not feeling this. What do you think that this is? Can you explain me these labs?" I think that the lack of access that we face as Black people, the violence that we face as Black people, the violence that we face as gay people, all contribute to the myriad of disparities that we have to traverse through to get even a fraction of what we deserve, healthcare wise and any other system wise.
Brother Craigwell.
Yeah, thanks again for that question. I'm thinking that when we talk about health disparities affecting Black gay men, we have to understand it's not just Black gay men who are impacted by this. There are Black women, Black trans men, and Black trans women, Black gender non-conforming communities as well. But we have to begin from the perspective of understanding that inherently in the Black community, there is gross mistrust of healthcare. Okay? We have to understand that as a given. That still exists. My perspective I'm coming from is mental health care. And there is still gross mistrust of mental health care. There is still mistrust about confidentiality and privacy. Now we see that there are gradual incremental increases in the number of Black people who are accessing mental health care. Even though that we know statistically in terms of the numbers, we have probably less than 1% of all of the mental health professionals in the United States are people of color. We know that that number is increasing, and we also know that many mental health professionals are beginning to incorporate cultural sensitivity into their treatment modalities so that they can better address the needs of Black and people of color communities. But like Larry was saying just now, there is still also a lot of fear, and there's still also a lot of problems with access to health care. We know that in those states in the United States that accepted the Affordable Care Act, that many people now have, like in New York State, for example, through the New York State Medicaid and Medicare program, you've got managed health care programs that insurance companies have sprung up to provide managed health care like Amita Care, like Metro Plus, like Affinity, like Fidelis. And they provide a raft of services that people can access that they don't need to have any money, they don't need to have, because they will fit in with the Medicare system. The problem with that, however, is that because it's Medicaid bound and Medicaid oriented, you have mental health professionals who may not want to accept Medicaid. First, because Medicaid does not pay significant returns on the cost, and there's a whole lot of paperwork. So it becomes two disincentives for mental health providers to accept Medicaid. Okay? Now, in the managed healthcare plans, there are Medicaid healthcare professionals who are paid through those managed healthcare plans. In those states throughout the country that have not expanded the Affordable Care Act, our Black and people of color LGBT community members are at a significant disadvantage. For example, I know of several people in the Atlanta area, Black gay men, who have struggled for a while just to get mental health care. Okay? Because they are being shunted from one clinic or from one person to the other. And even though there are mental health professionals in Atlanta who are Black, they want out-of-pocket payments, or you have to have insurance. And many people don't have that insurance. They depend on Medicaid for just the barest, even Ryan White funding and ADA for their HIV medication. And mental health care is not often covered extensively for that. So those are at least a couple of the challenges and the disparities. We're not even talking about some of the other healthcare issues that Black gay men are likely to deal with, including the risk of prostate cancer, including the risk of esophageal or anal cancer, including testicular cancer, including hypertension. And I just saw a report on the BBC before coming on this forum this evening, talking about one of the other side effects of COVID-19, that it actually causes mental health issues, including a rash of strokes and cardiovascular issues that come as a result of COVID. So I'm just putting all of that out there.
Antoine, I would be remiss if I didn't say, if you know anyone, especially Black and queer of any sort, that is looking for mental health services in Atlanta, we can link them for free to free services. So please reach out to me if you can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Same question. What are the challenges facing, to me, these health disparities in Black gay men and LGBT community? Doctor, and if you can talk about the bias, because everybody doesn't know what that means. I mean, we're here at Health IQ. We want to increase the understanding of what a bias is, and that's one of the things that I hear used often. Dr. Nicholson.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there is implicit bias and explicit bias that shows itself. And when we only have a few people at the table that don't have an immersion in community, that are not connected to community, I think that's when we leave the solutions vulnerable to being really limited. In the wake of COVID, a number of our AARP state offices across the country, rolled up their sleeves and got to work in community, shoulder to shoulder, with a range of stakeholders. And I'm thinking about our Michigan state office that actually serves on the governor's task force, COVID-19 task force. I was just talking to Curtis Lipscomb of the Black Pride affiliate in Detroit, who is probably one of the only Black gay men that is on that task force. What a critical voice for the people of Michigan, and especially the people of Detroit. There's the Chicago Mayor's task force that is bringing a consciousness around racial justice and LGBTQ justice to that work. And our AARP colleagues in Chicago are a part of that effort as well. Disrupting disparities is a multi-pronged effort. There's never too much that any of us can do to disrupt those disparities. In fact, at AARP, we have a whole Disrupt Disparities initiative that existed before COVID. And so COVID has just sort of taken it to a whole nother level, a whole nother gear. And so, we have a task force that's focused on public education and outreach. It's led by my boss, Edna Kane Williams. And then there's another task force that's led by my colleague, Elaine Ryan, who leads our state advocacy work, that's more policy focused. And, of course, we also have to do what we need to do in court. Our litigation team led the charge to file an amicus brief in support of the plaintiffs in the LGBTQ employment discrimination cases before the Supreme Court. We're proud to have been on the right side of history. We know that one in five older LGBT adults reported recent involuntary job loss, at least in part to their perceived sexual orientation and gender identity. We know that older LGBT workers, they postpone retirement, that's if they retire at all, at a higher rate compared to the general population. And it's likely due to a lifetime of economic disadvantage, right? And so that case, that 6-3 win for the LGBTQ SGL community was major in terms of disrupting some of the disparities we see in employment discrimination. We still need to pass the Equality Act, which will make sure that we are covered in the areas of housing and public accommodation and in other areas that are not covered by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. But the last thing I'll add is, while we celebrate the work that's happening on the community level and on the state level and the work that we're doing in the courts, not alone, but in partnership and in solidarity with leaders of conscience across this country, we know that the Department of Health and Human Services, they proposed a change to the Affordable Care Act. It's Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act that would eliminate specific references to sexual orientation and gender identity from their non-discrimination protections. We filed a public comment opposing that. They finalized the rule. Now, we hope that the Supreme Court decision will invalidate the administration's attempt to weaken non-discrimination protections in the Affordable Care Act. But we've got to stay vigilant. We cannot allow something like that to happen ever, particularly in the midst of this global pandemic. And so hopefully that gives you some flavor for the work that we are leading and the work that we are a part of to make Black Lives Matter, work that is germane and consequential when it comes to the challenges that Black gay men, Black same-gender loving men across this country face day to day, and consider this a down payment on more work to come.
Looks tough. I mean, it seems like we're in a situation where our community is under siege. I would just like to ask each of you, how do you think this economic impact, because I really see the economics of uncertainty on our community. We're going to start with you, Dr. Nikolai, and I really want to make sure we get through this because I'm really nervous that people think this is going away tomorrow. I'm really getting the feeling that our community may not understand that this could be a 2-year adventure.
You're right. It didn't start overnight. It will not end overnight. I think the economic justice issues that COVID-19 has illuminated, particularly as it pertains to essential workers, is of enormous concern. It is something that we continue to track. This is a layered challenge that we face. I think the Human Rights Campaign released some research on folks of color, and specifically Black folks, how they've been impacted in this COVID-19 economy. It's a significant worry. I mean, if you're an older adult, if you're a senior, and you're working on a fixed income, or if you're really just surviving on Social Security, These are frightening times. And so, we've got to make sure that for the folks that are older, that are working and wish to continue to work, that they don't have to contend with age discrimination in the midst of everything else. So if you are, Black, gay, older adult, not only you have to worry about discrimination based upon your race, based upon your sexual orientation, but you also have to worry about discrimination based upon your age, And so, there are some that would suggest that the Title VII ruling actually helps the fight against age discrimination. I'll let the lawyers debate that. But this gig economy, for example, yeah, it's great, if you need a little bit of extra money, but for a lot of folks, that's, it's gig plus gig to make ends meet. And we know that, gig work doesn't provide you with benefits, doesn't provide you with paid time off. And so, I think we have to begin to think about our social contract a little bit differently. Our social contract to one another, the role, that government should play in supporting our communities in the midst of pandemics like this and beyond. And so I think those conversations are just beginning to kick into the next gear. But all of this is a part of the conversation around how we make Black lives matter, not just today, tomorrow, but well into the future.
Super. Larry?
Frankly, I worry about the economic implications for people, especially highly marginalized people. Thinking about Black trans women, Black queer men, Black people who may be experiencing like homelessness or joblessness during this time. I agree implicitly with Dr. Nikolai that we need to reevaluate and recommit to our social contract to one another. As if the lack of leadership around the COVID response or the response to COVID and the response to any of the crises that happen to the Black community is any indicator, it's going to take us and our own commitment to one another to get through this. Again, what we have to offer, what I have to offer as a person living on this earth and as a Black person committed to my community's elevation is our services that we offer at Thrive. If you're a person who is experiencing hardship and you're living with HIV, we have a COVID emergency fund. We are able to link people to like emotional wellness services and food pantries, as well as supportive services across the country. But I wish I could say that like I felt like, the increase, the tremendous increase in the wealth gap during this time was an indicator of anything hopeful, but it's not. So I agree with the doctor. I think that we need to band together, and as Essex Hemphill said, to link arms and create a chain of protection around one another.
I think there's a huge denial. I like it, and I listened to Dr. Nikolai actually share his data, which is always great when you do Health IQ here at Rolling Out, because you get insights on what it is. But when we say words like social contracts, it's kind of like bias. What is a social contract? I'm not sure people understand community benefits. There are just quite a few words kind of going around, and we all need to get a handle on what they mean, because you movers and shakers are saying them, but for many people in our community, we still might not know these buzzwords that are beginning to kind of bubble up. This person talks about social contract. This next person talks about, particularly in these movements, community benefit contracts. Like what should the community? What do you think about that, Mr. Craigwell? This community contract and community benefits.
I think let me start us again. One of the things that I like about this forum is that Dr. Nikwartalai is representing AARP, which is one of the most progressive organizations nationally that look at issues affecting elderly, the seniors, the senior community. And I'm really glad to hear that he's here to talk about from an LGBT perspective or LGBT seniors. Because one of the things that you're talking about just now, Munson, about social contract and community benefit and community contracts, there is a sense among many elderly of an expectation that I worked, I should get X, and I contributed, this is what I expect to get in return. And there is a universal assumption about the role that governments have for us, that the role and responsibilities that governments and leaders have to us. We as a community, we as a people elect representatives to do for us what we cannot do individually, but can do for us collectively. And so that creates a contract, that creates a bond, that creates a level of expectation. I elected you to collaborate with others of like mind to get me resources and access for my survival. And when there is a breakdown in that contract, that's why we have a problem now. Because one of the things I am hearing is that a lot of elderly, especially LGBT elderly, are floundering. They are floundering because they worked all their lives. They contributed to pension schemes and 401ks and all these things. But because the places where they invested the money have suddenly become wiped out by drops in the stock market, they are now left bereft. They're now left trying to scramble and figure out, how am I going to pay my rent? Should my rent be priority more than my medication? Am I going to be able to see the same doctor because my doctor might have changed and is no longer in that network that I was in? And for many seniors, it's a big juggle trying to figure out, where do I go? How do I do? And understanding that with the progression with technology, many are still trying to catch up. Many do not, they might have one cell phone. I spoke to somebody recently. She said, my cell phone dropped in some water. I suspect it might have dropped in the toilet bowl. But she said, my cell phone dropped in some water. I had to get a new cell phone. I had just got accustomed to that cell phone. Now I have to learn all over again how to navigate and learn about this new cell phone. And I'm tired. And she's been struggling to get food. Even though there are a number of food pantries and everybody is providing food, she still has been struggling to get food. She said, this is an elderly woman. And so the social contract, the social compact, the community expectation, the community benefit has significantly broken down.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add to that, just to offer just a few really tangible examples for folks. When we say social contract, what are we talking about? And, you know, AARP, we've been around for 60 years. A lot of folks know us for our advocacy work on issues like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Social Security being a lifeline for a lot of seniors, a lot of older adults. A lot of people aren't always familiar about the history of Social Security and how it first started off, you know, as a resource for widows. And then over time, it grew. And, you know, now, you know, folks over the age of 65, you know, have access to Social Security and others in special circumstances. Medicare and Medicaid, you know, make healthcare, you know, more affordable and accessible to our older adults and seniors, and again, folks with special circumstances. The, unemployment insurance, that's another example of the social safety net. You know, the stimulus payments that a number of folks received, you know, related to some of the federal relief packages that came out of Congress. that AARP was on the front lines of fighting for. Those stimulus payments are an example of the social safety net. And of course, SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. There are so many people and families across the country that depend on those SNAP benefits in order to put food on the table. And so when we talk about the social contract, when we talk about the social safety net, these are some really tangible examples of what programs we knit together to form that safety net.
Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Nikolai. Anybody have any questions out there in the social media landscape, Facebook, just post some. We've got about 10 minutes left, gentlemen. So I would like to just ask you, given the severity of what we've had over the last 100 days, and now given the fact that, we all appear to have another 100 days, definitely that as much as we can, that this, what I would call Black and obviously the Black gay LGBT community, how are we going to manage, and we'll start with you, Dr. Nikolai, our desire to want to protest at this same moment that all of these things are going up. The rates are going up, the unemployment's going up. How do we still want many people to be engaged in this protest for this uprising?
Yeah. Well, first thing, I just want to take a moment to honor the over 120,000 Americans who have died at the hands of COVID-19. I want to acknowledge the over 50,000 older adults and seniors in nursing homes that have died at the hands of COVID-19. And I want to challenge us all. To dig deep and to channel our activism in some extraordinary ways, if not in our own names, in the names of those who are no longer here and cannot channel their activism. Voting is a part of the equation, as is channeling our activism in a variety of different ways. Peaceful protests in the street, socially distanced, of course. But there are so many other ways in which we can support, by giving donations of food and of money and other resources to leaders on the front line, some of the leaders that are here today, supporting their organizations, on the front lines. That's a part of how we make Black Lives Matter 365 days a year. And we didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of here overnight, but I just also want to salute our brothers and sisters and people of conscience that are risking a lot. They're putting a lot on the line in the name of racial justice, in the name of LGBTQ justice, in the name of decency. So, what a time to be alive, what a time to be a leader, what a time to begin to reimagine the world as it should be, with liberty and justice for all. And so we won't stop at AARP, and I suspect we're in good company.
Say that again. Larry?
I shade to everything that the doctor said. The only thing that I will add is that, in addition to building off of what he said about adding where we can, adding a bit of trauma-informed love, pray for those people. As the doctor said, people are risking it all. People are walking squarely into a pandemic, and it's because we've been going through these issues since 1650s, the emancipation of Black people, or the so-called emancipation of Black people, honoring what we have on the line, what we've lost over the years due to the hands of anti-Black racism. Writing letters, as the doctor said, voting, making sure that we lend our voices to the potential solutions. holding people accountable, even the people, especially the people that supposed to be representing us, the people that are a part of our parties. But showing up for your communities, where you are locally, where you are, because if you're hearing my voice right now, you're probably, it's the Black queer people, the Black trans people in your area are probably suffering. The people that are aging with HIV, the people that are aging in general are probably suffering. And there are ways that we can add to that advocacy. Joseph Beam said that Black men loving Black men is the revolutionary act. I would update that only to say that Black people loving and supporting Black people in this moment, where our lives, our everything is on the line right now. And I think that that is the revolutionary act, putting our voices to use, putting our agencies, our personal agencies, as well as our organizations to use as for the betterment of all Black people, prioritizing the most marginalized amongst us. And as it relates to Black people, that is Black trans women who are losing their lives every day at the hand of, unfortunately, other Black people, because of the oppression that Black people face every day. The subjugation that we face has us at a place that we can't even love ourselves adequately. So turning the energy, that manna that we have from God outward into our communities and in a healing way is what we must do right now.
You were going to short us a little bit at first, with that ashe, and he clicked and made that noise of hope and acknowledged the loss has been incredible. I mean, you think of me obviously being in the age of ARP, but you think of the giants, like a whole group of African redwoods just falling down. You think of the children who aren't going to be able to hold grandparents' hands. You think of the songs and traditions, cultural traditions just snapped away. And you think of the loving words that you won't be able to share, or graduation pictures that they won't be able to be in. And it just makes and breaks your heart to know that it's happening and you can't see them and you can't be next to them as they expire. And that's Black and gay, Black LGBT, Black, period. Because when they see you, they don't necessarily, if they don't talk to you, may not have any clue, but they know you Black. They may not know anything else, but they know you Black. They know we are Black. So we have to stand up. My dear brother, we got 3 minutes, and I love you all. I just want you all to know that. Say it out loud, just so that this is a moment that, at least in time, we got to share. We got 2 minutes, Brother Craigwell.
I think I just want to actually recognize there's an organization here in New York City, in Brooklyn, the GRIO, which provides services for elderly LGBT people of color, Black and people of color. It's called the GRIO. And they have been engaging in a number of activities and events and trying very hard with their programming to reach out and keep the members of their community, engaged. Actually, on the 16th of July, our organization is hosting an online forum to talk about elderly LGBT people of color during COVID, but more importantly, how are they dealing with the loneliness and the isolation that comes with being alone, comes with growing old, comes from a youth-focused society that after you've reached a certain age and you have a few gray hairs, you get cast aside. And so we are going to be talking about that with some of the people from the GRIO and a couple of other. There's a really powerful woman, a Black lesbian woman that I know very well, Dr. Wilhelmina Perry. She's going to join us on the forum on the 16th to talk about what it's like being an older woman, an older lesbian during COVID-19 and this. But we also have to remember that while we can think about the Black and elderly communities, we also have to remember that our younger LGBT people of color are very much in need of our guidance and support, because many of them are also feeling very lonely, very isolated, and very abandoned. So they also need a lot of care.
I want to thank all three of you for coming. Dr. Nikolai, obviously, Larry. For me, I just want you to know the culture needs our dialogue. For me, I want the community to know we thank ARP. Dr. Nikolai, you're probably one of the best examples we've seen of a data guy who's cool with it. You know, like you give it to us and it's still relevant. And I think that's so important for our culture to understand that ARP is a resource that you will not find often in our community, dedicated to our community, and they're there. And we've got to utilize them and join with them in their movement. So I want to thank them for sponsoring Health IQ. But more than anything, I think it's authentic. You know, it's different when you have a sponsor that is really not there. They're on the front line, and they always have been, and we appreciate them. And Black is Black. The whole idea right now, in this pandemic, love somebody, because our community is suffering to the nth degree, and love is one of those things that just a phone call away, just a few groceries. The last thing is stop being judgmental. Truly try not to judge. Step away. People are going to be hungry, and wear no shame. Anybody out here during this pandemic, wear no shame. If you need help, we really want you at Health IQ and rolling out. Log on to ARP, log on to any of these gentlemen's websites, because we as a community need to understand that this is not the moment to wear shame. This is not the moment to be, to lack the pride to be who you are, and to understand that there are resources available for you. So once again, thanks to ARP, and once again, thanks to all of you gentlemen for joining, rolling out. Peace, love, and soul. Last thing, you do not have to be in the street, but you do have to be in the struggle. I'm Munson Steve for Health IQ. Peace.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice meeting you guys. Talk to you.
Well, take care.
Stay in touch.
Yes, definitely.
I will stay in touch. We'll link